want you to turn your Bible, if you will, to 1 Samuel chapter 24. 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 14. Minor in the major and major in the minor. Minor in the major and major in the minor. These two questions ask a question of King Saul. King Saul is one who is chasing after David. His question is a fair question. This question that David is asking is a fair question because Saul has a great responsibility. After all, he's the first king of Israel. He's the king that the people chose to run the country. The individual, the country, the people had a desire for a king. They wanted to be like other countries, other territories, other areas, had a man whom they could see that was making decisions on their behalf. They wanted to have a relationship with the man that was over them, and God was already their king. He was already their lead, their guide. But they wanted someone that they could actually look at and interact with from a social basis and a social relationship with. And after prayer and God permitting, he allowed them to make Saul their king. They were looking for an individual who was strong, who was tall. And the Bible talks about him standing head and shoulder above his other family members and other men. And they were looking for someone who had leadership ability. And the people chose Saul. Saul was an individual who, in return, also listened to the people. God gave him commands, and God gave him authority. God granted the people their wishes by allowing them to pick Saul to govern them and be their king. However, Saul made some bad decisions. God told him to take out the Amalekites and take them all out. In other words, kill them. Every man, every woman, every boy, every girl, every sheep, every cow, every horse, everything. But the people was in his ear. See, one of the things I want you to understand in the democratic way of life, the democratic form of election, the democratic form of government, the people dictate how the country is ran. And it dictates how or who is running or making decisions to run it. There's no real reason to complain when you have made the decision as to who you want to make decisions for you. There's no real reason to pull back. In fact, we need to pray even more because of man being in leadership position. and whereby God will lead them into where he would have them to go, whereby God will give them the authority and the power to make good, godly decisions about the people in whom they are in charge of. These individuals, they chose Saul, and God told him to take out the whole country, a whole tribe of people. But he did not, because the people seen some good. They seen some good cattle, they seen some good sheep, they seen some good things that they wanted to keep out, and they began to desire those things, and he listened to the people. And he also saved the king. And in doing so, God pulled the kingdom away from Saul. And he gave the kingdom to David. David was a young lad at the time. David was one who was taking care of his father's sheep. David was one who was not really a chosen one by his father to be successful. You ever notice how your success is sometimes, if you're not careful, based on what other people think about you? Sometimes there are those who will say something about you that's not promoting you to be up front. They're saying that you're not worthy enough to lead or be up front based on what they see in you. And sometimes that's done because based on what they think about you. David was not one that would have been chose to be a king. Samuel went to his father's house, and his father, God had given Samuel the charge to go to Jesse's house. And at Jesse's house, you would find the new king. I want you to understand that because Samuel was one that was he feared Saul, because Saul was one who had done God injustice by not doing what God had asked. God had gave a charge to Samuel, and he didn't want Saul to know that God had given him that charge. So when he went down to Jesse's house, he went down to Jesse's house with the pretense of going to do a sacrifice, to make sure that Saul didn't know that he was there. But when he arrived at Jesse's house, Jesse introduced him to some of his boys, in fact, all of his boys except David, as to be anointed as possible king. But as Samuel, began to try and pour out the oil out of the horn, the oil would not flow. And he began to let Jesse know that I'm not going to rest. Do you have another son? Yes, I have one more. A runt. Out in the field, keeping sheep. A shepherd wasn't thought of much. In fact, in the character of a shepherd's word was not even strong enough to be heard in court. A shepherd was one that people didn't think a whole lot about. A shepherd was one that wasn't looked up high into society. A shepherd was one that spent a whole lot of time out by themselves. A shepherd was one that had to, as David said, hey, sometimes he had to meditate and hide God's word in his heart because he had no one else to talk to. Because being a shepherd was a lonely job. I got one more that's out in the field. Well, I'm going to wait. We can't do anything. We're not going to dine. We're not going to sit. We're going to wait until you get him. When David came in, the oil began to flow on David. And David was anointed king over Israel. Well, Israel already had a king. The king was Saul. Saul was the king of Israel, but God had already taken the throne away from him, even though he was still sitting on the throne. It's possible to be in a place that God has already assigned to someone else. It's possible to be doing something that God has already put someone else in charge over. and you're just holding a seat. That's why you can't get real comfortable. Because see, the thing I want to understand is that God always has a ram in the bush. Don't begin to think that you're so important that God cannot or will not replace you. Don't begin to think that you're so important that your time on this planet is going to be forever. I want you to understand that Saul's reign was over. Saul knew that his reign was over. Samuel knew that Saul's reign was over. But he wouldn't accept the fact that it was over. What God was doing in the meantime was growing up young David to learn how to trust God. Growing up young David to learn how to pursue after God. In fact, the Bible says that he was born after God's own heart. And you all understand that the young David grew up and he grew, and as he grew, I want you to understand that there was a war that was going on, and the Philistines and the Israelites, Israel were fighting against each other. And the big warrior would come out every day and challenge the Israelites. And no one would take the challenge. David's father sent him to the battlefield. I'm just getting you to where we're going today. David's father sent him to the battlefield. You know the story. And when he sent him to the battlefield, not to fight, but to take some supplies to his brothers. When David arrived there, what he found out was the people of God was afraid. So I want to understand that it's possible to be a child of God, believe and worship in God, and still be afraid of the enemy. But when David arrived there, what he found, there was no challengers. When David arrived there, he found that here it is, a giant comes out every day and insult his God. Well, when David said, I'll challenge him, his brother said, you go back home and take care of those few sheep. Saul says, come on in, David, I got you. You can wear my armor. In other words, what he was saying was, watch this, somebody fight him. God had already told him that your reign is over. But guess what? You can't use other people's stuff. You have to use what God has given you. You can't be someone that you're not. You have to be who God has made you. The helmet didn't fit. The armor was too big. What David said is, all I need is my sling and my shepherd's bag. And I'm going to pick up about 5 smooth stones and I'll take out this great giant. And he did. And when he took out Goliath, took Goliath's sword and took off his head, held his head up to the Philistines. The Philistine began to flee. There was a reward that would be given to the man who took out the great giant. They would get the opportunity to marry the daughter of the king. And not only talk about the wealth, but David now becomes a great warrior, and he's also Saul's son-in-law. What he finds out is, not only does David know how to fight, he's also a great musician. And what he also found was that when the music that David played and the songs that he sung would soothe his spirit, because the evil spirit had taken him over. And when David was singing, his spirit would be calmed. David was his warrior and David was his musician. But David also was man after God's own heart, and David was king over Israel. Saul wanted to take David out. And because Saul wanted to take David out, why? Because he knew that David was the king. And he was just sitting in a place holding and marking time. Now here we find today that after he had challenged David, well, he had threatened to kill David, David leaves the palace, leaves his wife. Jonathan, which is Saul's son, loved David, and David loved Jonathan. Jonathan kept David a post as to what was going on in the palace. Here it is. Saul now is chasing the countryside after David. He hears about the Philistines are attacking some of their territory. Here's Saul. He chases after the Philistine. David has about 600 men that are following him. I'm just trying to get y'all to where we're going. And after these 600 men are following David, David was also fighting the Philistine. Watch this. The king wants to take out David, who has the king who's also an enemy to the Philistine. David knows that Saul wants to take him out, but he's also fighting the Philistines. They're at war, and he finds out that David is there in a certain area. What he sees is that if I could get to where David is, I can get him surrounded, not the Philistines. I can get David surrounded, not the enemy. I can get David surrounded, and I could box him in, and I could take David out. So his mission was to go and try and kill David. David's assignment, and what he was doing was fighting against the Philistines. What Saul's assignment should have been was having war against the people that had war against the Israelites. But his war was not the Philistines. His war was David. Sometimes we just find ourselves fighting the wrong war. Sometimes we find ourselves fighting the wrong side. Sometimes we call ourselves, because of popularity, we fight in the minor things and don't address the major things. It was more important to serve God than it was to serve man. It's more important to do what God's assignment is than to do what man has asked you to do. They find themselves in a situation. And then Saul hears that the Philistines are now in another area. So he turns his attention to the Philistines and begin to chase after them. A messenger came to him and began to let him know that David is hiding out in the woods. And so what he did was he stopped again. Do you ever notice how someone who's not following God, they all over the place? They make all kind of bad decisions. They stop chasing the Philistines and turn his attention to start to chase after David. And so after chasing after David, he finds himself in a place there where it was much water there. He finds himself in a place where there was also a cave there. He finds himself in a place where it was beautiful and everything looked really well, refreshing. David was in that place. He was on one side of the mountain. See, I want you to understand, your enemy is always going to be close. And David was on the other side of the mountain. He entered into the cave on one side, and David entered into a cave on the other side. When he heard where David was, watch this. David had, you heard me say, 600 men of war. And what Saul did was he got 3,000 men, faithful and great men of Israel, and went after David. Now, and they find themselves, David in one side of a cave, and he finds Saul on the other side of the cave. They both in the same cave, and the Saul goes in to cover his feet. In other words, go to sleep for warmth. He finds himself inside of the cave. Inside of the cave was David. David's men found out that Saul was inside of the cave. Told David of it. Told David, now watch this. Your enemy is at your hand. His life is in your hands. In other words, here it is, the same man that has a desire to take out you, take your life. Now you can take his life. He's inside the cave asleep. Watch this. God will put your enemy right in front of you to see if you're going to become like your enemy. See, the people that do you wrong and people that do you an injustice, what God will do is he'll give you the opportunity, watch this, to forgive them, to move on from them and not harm them, or you have the choice of becoming just like them. Here's the thing that I say, God don't punish me for what you do to me. God punishes me. His wrath comes against me on how I react to what you do to me. See, one thing I want to understand is, in my life, I had some pretty mean folk in my life. I had some pretty terrible people in my life. I had a manager that was really, really mean, and he wasn't just mean to me. He was mean to every black person that came through the company. I stayed there too long. He came to me one day and began to say things like, "You one of the most intelligent black people I know." I said, "You don't know many black people." And watch this. And here it is, this particular individual treated me so bad in a whole company. There was one toolbox stole out of the company. Guess whose toolbox it was? The black man's. Yeah. And when I go to him about the toolbox, he brushed it off like it's nothing at all. But what he didn't know was, God was with me. Watch this. I had learned how to make toys out of sticks. I had learned how to put things together with mud. I had learned how to do some things that most people didn't have to do because they had things to do it with. And so I kept on working and kept on producing. And then, lo and behold, 5 years later, they promoted me to a position over him. When they promoted me to the position over him, then all of a sudden Satan gets on your shoulder and begin to say, "Now you got him. Just do to him what he was doing to you." God said, don't be him. Don't allow him to make you him. And so what I did was I treated him with favor. I treated him with laughter. I treated him with kindness. And one day he came to me and he began to say that, "You are a really wonderful, nice guy." I said, "I know." He said, "I thought that you would have been gone by now." I said, "I know. But the thing that you didn't know is that I knew who you don't know. And the thing that happened to us was because of me knowing who I know and you not knowing who I know, and the position that I have was not given to me. The position I have by you, the position I have was given to me by God. In fact, wait a minute. When I was promoted over him, his birthday would be every year in June. He always took a vacation. The owner came to me that June and assigns me his job. He comes to work after vacation and he began to tell me, "Arthur, we need you this, we need this, and we need that." I said, "Did you talk to Harold? You need to go talk to Harold." He goes to talk to Harold. He comes back. He said, I knew he was going, I knew that, yeah. I said, yeah, okay, yeah. I knew that too. But what I became was friends to him. Help him through whatever he needed to be helped through. I had to check off his work. David's in the hole. Saul's in the hole. One of the ways to get rid of your enemy is when it's available to get rid of someone who wants to take you out. Take them out. But David said that he was not going to, watch this, touch the prophet of God, his father, he was not going to do anything to harm him. But what he did do was he cut a piece of his skirt off. And when he cut a piece of his skirt off, the next morning, I'm going somewhere with this. And the next morning, what Saul did was Saul got up to leave the cave. David got up and left the cave as well. Saul gets ahead of David. David began to call out to Saul. Saul answered the question. They said, David, he heard David's voice and began to say, David, my son. David began to let him know that, watch this, last night I could have taken your life. Last night I took off a piece of your skirt. Last night, if I was your enemy, I could have already taken you out. I want you to understand, I'm not your enemy. And you are mine, but I'm not yours. And so watch this. And so what he began to let David know was that he said, David asked him, judge between me and you, judge. And then Saul began to let him know that I am worse than you. Because he had given him threats to take out his life. But David had given him life. And so watch this. And he asked him the question when he came out. Here's what he asked him the question. After whom is the king of Israel come out? After who are you spending all your time chasing? After what are you spending all of your time trying to achieve? After what? I'm talking about Mariah now. After what are you spending all your time trying to accomplish? After what are you spending all your time talking but not trying to get your children saved? After what are you spending all your time trying to make money but not making provision for your soul? After what are you spending all your time, watch this, coming and going and not committing to God's throne? After what are you searching for? After what are you spending out all your time? After what are you coming out there?
Hello, family. Now's the time we can all participate. We can give via our website, 3mbc.org, and Facebook /MMMBC, using our PayPal link.